During World War II, there was a gardening method so revolutionary that families grew massive harvests without a single ounce of fertilizer. Gardens that should have depleted after one season kept producing for years. Soil that conventional wisdom said would die became richer with every harvest. One method eliminated the need for every agricultural input that farmers were told they couldn't live without. No fertilizers, no soil amendments, no compost purchases, just a technique that made soil feed itself while feeding you. The method wasn't secret, it wasn't complicated, it didn't require special knowledge or expensive materials, just understanding how plants actually nourish soil instead of depleting it, how gardens can build fertility instead of consuming it, and within 20 years of victory, this method had been systematically erased from every agricultural textbook. Not because it stopped working, because it threatened a fertilizer industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Because you cannot sell inputs to people whose gardens need nothing. Because you cannot build empires on soil that feeds itself. Today, agricultural corporations don't want you to know this method exists, because if gardeners realize that plants create their own fertilizer, that nature builds soil without human intervention, and that a simple technique eliminates all chemical dependency, their entire business model would collapse. But the truth can't stay buried forever. In this video, we're uncovering the complete story of the WWII zero fertilizer gardening method that modern agriculture deliberately erased, the technique that still produces abundant harvests without any inputs, the knowledge that costs nothing, requires no purchases, and creates fertility from thin air. By the end, you'll understand why your grandparents' gardens kept getting better while yours keeps needing more, and you'll know exactly how they did it. Number 1, the British allotment miracle. Britain under siege, German submarines sinking supply ships, food imports cut by 2/3, the government launched the Dig for Victory campaign, converting every available space into vegetable gardens. Millions of British families started growing food, but there was a critical problem. Most had never gardened before, and there was no fertilizer available. Everything was diverted to commercial farms for the war effort. The government issued a simple instruction: grow green manure. Cut it down, leave it on the soil, plant through it. Most people ignored this advice. It seemed insane. Dead plants on the soil. That was messy, ugly. Surely it couldn't work. But a few listened. Mostly elderly gardeners who remembered techniques from before chemical fertilizers. They planted fast-growing crops: clover, vetch, rye, mustard. Let them grow for a few weeks. Cut them down at ground level while still green. Left the cut material lying on the soil surface as mulch. Then they planted vegetables directly through this green layer. Made holes in the mulch. Put in seeds or transplants. Let the dead green material sit there decomposing around the growing food crops. People thought they were mad, planting into garbage, growing food in what looked like a neglected mess. But within weeks, the results were undeniable. Their vegetables grew faster, bigger, healthier. While neighbors using traditional bare soil methods struggled with poor growth and low yields, these gardens exploded with production. By harvest time, the difference was shocking. Gardens using green manure and mulch produced 2 to 3 times more food than conventional gardens. Tomatoes were larger, lettuce was more abundant, root vegetables were massive. And here's what stunned everyone. The second year was even better. The soil had transformed. It was darker, richer, crumbly instead of hard. Gardens that should have depleted after one season were more fertile than before planting. Agricultural inspectors investigated. They documented yields that shouldn't have been possible without fertilizer. Soil tests showed nitrogen levels increasing instead of decreasing, organic matter building instead of depleting. And the method was working, not marginally, dramatically. Gardens were fertilizing themselves, creating fertility from nothing but sunlight and plants. The government promoted the technique in official materials. Green manure for victory became a campaign slogan. Instructions were distributed to millions of households. The method became standard practice across British allotments. By 1945, Britain was producing 1.5 million tons of vegetables annually from home gardens, much of it grown with zero fertilizer using the green manure method. The technique had proven itself under the harshest possible conditions. After the war, agricultural corporations began producing synthetic fertilizers commercially. They needed markets. They needed dependency. The green manure method was their enemy. It eliminated the need for their products. Quietly, systematically, the method was removed from agricultural education. New gardening guides excluded it. Extension services stopped recommending it. Within a generation, the technique that had fed Britain during its darkest hour was forgotten. Number 2, the nitrogen that comes from air. After the war, scientists studying the green manure method discovered something that challenged agricultural industry assumptions. The gardens weren't getting nitrogen from soil, they were pulling it from the air. The atmosphere is 78% nitrogen. Trillions of tons of nitrogen float above every garden. But plants cannot use atmospheric nitrogen directly. They need it in fixed form, converted into compounds they can absorb. Certain plants perform this conversion naturally. Legumes, peas, beans, clover, vetch form relationships with soil bacteria called rhizobia. These bacteria colonize legume roots, forming visible nodules. Inside these nodules, bacteria convert atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. This process is called nitrogen fixation. It's free fertilizer, captured from air, requiring no mining, no industrial production, no chemical synthesis, just bacteria and legumes working together. A clover crop can fix 100 to 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre in a single season. That's equivalent to several $100s worth of synthetic fertilizer, generated for free from air. When the green manure crop is cut down and left on the soil, the fixed nitrogen releases as the plants decompose. The bacteria in the nodules die and release their stored nitrogen. The entire crop becomes a slow-release fertilizer, feeding the next crop planted through it. But the magic wasn't just legumes. All plants contribute nitrogen when used as green manure. They don't fix it from air like legumes do, but they mine it from deep in the soil with their roots. When cut down, they bring that deep nitrogen to the surface where food crops can access it. This principle, using plants to capture and cycle nutrients, had been known for thousands of years. Traditional agriculture practiced it universally before chemicals, but modern agriculture abandoned it when synthetic fertilizers became available. The fertilizer industry needed farmers to believe that nitrogen must be purchased, that it had to come from factories, that natural processes couldn't provide enough. Research proving otherwise was suppressed. Studies showing green manure matching or exceeding synthetic fertilizer effectiveness went unpublished. Data demonstrating that legumes could provide all the nitrogen a garden needed was buried, because acknowledging this truth would destroy the nitrogen fertilizer market. Billions in annual sales depended on people not knowing that plants could pull fertilizer from the air for free. The knowledge was too dangerous to allow, so it was erased from agricultural education and replaced with dependency on industrial products. Number 3, the mulch that fed soil while feeding you. The cut green manure wasn't just nitrogen fertilizer, it was soil food, a buffet for billions of organisms that would transform dead material into living fertility. When green plant matter is laid on soil surface, decomposition begins immediately. Bacteria arrive first. They consume the softest tissues, multiply explosively. Their populations boom within days. Fungi follow. Thread-like mycelia spread through the decomposing material. They break down tougher plant structures, cellulose, lignin, create networks that connect everything in the soil. Protozoa come next. They feed on bacteria and fungi. This predation releases nutrients that were locked in microbial bodies, makes them available to plant roots. Arthropods arrive, springtails, mites, tiny decomposers that shred material into smaller pieces. Each bite creates more surface area for bacteria and fungi to attack. Earthworms move up from below. They pull decomposing material down into the soil, mix it throughout the profile, create channels that aerate and drain, leave castings that are perfectly balanced fertilizer. This cascade of life transforms dead plants into humus, the dark, stable organic matter that makes soil fertile. The process takes months. During that time, the mulch layer protects the soil, prevents erosion, conserves moisture, and continuously feeds the food web below. And here's what modern agriculture doesn't tell you. This biological process creates more fertility than it consumes. The soil doesn't just maintain, it improves, gets richer, darker, more alive with every cycle. The green manure method exploited this perfectly. Plant a nitrogen-fixing crop, let it grow and capture solar energy. Cut it down, let it feed the soil organisms. Plant food crops through it while decomposition continues. Harvest the food. Plant another green manure crop. Repeat. Each cycle added more organic matter, more nitrogen, more biological activity. The soil improved continuously. Gardens practicing this method for years became extraordinarily fertile. Black, crumbly, earthworm-rich soil that grew massive crops without any external inputs. Research stations documented this phenomenon. Plots managed with green manure for a decade contained 3 times the organic matter and 5 times the biological activity of conventionally managed plots. The fertility was building, not depleting, but this research threatened the industry narrative. They needed people to believe that soil depletes naturally, that fertility must be added from external sources, that without purchased inputs, gardens would fail. The evidence proving otherwise was filed away and forgotten. Gardeners were taught that soil improvement requires buying products instead of growing plants. Number 4, the root systems that mined deep minerals. Green manure crops did more than fix nitrogen. Their root systems mined minerals from deep in the soil, bringing them up where shallow-rooted food crops could access them. Different plants have different root patterns. Lettuce roots barely go 6 inches deep. Tomatoes might reach 2 feet, but green manure crops, especially ones like daikon radish, alfalfa, or chicory, send roots 6, 8, even 10 feet down. These deep roots encounter minerals that surface crops never reach. Phosphorus locked in deeper soil layers, potassium bound to clay particles, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, and dozens of trace elements present but inaccessible. The roots produce exudates, acids, and enzymes that dissolve minerals from soil particles. They make unavailable minerals available, bring them into plant tissues, incorporate them into organic compounds. When the crop is cut down and left on the surface, those minerals come with it. The decomposing plant material releases them. They become available to the next crop, the food plants that couldn't have reached them alone. This process is called nutrient cycling. It's how natural ecosystems maintain fertility without external inputs. Deep-rooted plants mine minerals. They die or are eaten. The minerals return to the surface. Shallow-rooted plants access them. The cycle continues infinitely. Traditional agriculture understood this intuitively. Farmers planted deep-rooted cover crops, not just for nitrogen, but for complete mineral nutrition. They knew that diverse root systems accessed different soil layers and brought up different nutrients. Modern agriculture abandoned this knowledge, replaced it with synthetic fertilizers that provide only NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, ignored the dozens of other elements plants need, created deficiencies that then required more products to correct. The green manure method provided complete nutrition. Not just NPK, but everything, because it worked with plants' natural ability to mine what they need from soil. Trials comparing green manure gardens to synthetically fertilized gardens showed surprising results. Green manure crops not only matched synthetic fertilizer yields, but produced more nutritious food, higher vitamin content, more minerals, better flavor. Because synthetic fertilizers provide limited elements, green manure provides complete nutrition. The plants get everything they need, not just what the fertilizer industry thinks is important. This complete nutrition was another threat. If gardens could provide better nutrition without products, what was the point of the products? The industry needed to hide this truth. So research on mineral cycling through green manure was discouraged. Data showing superior nutrition from these systems was not published, and gardeners were taught that complete nutrition requires expensive amendments. Number 5, the weed seeds that never germinated. The green manure mulch layer had an unexpected benefit that made gardening dramatically easier. It prevented weeds, almost completely. Without herbicides or constant cultivation, weed seeds need light to germinate. Most won't sprout if buried under even an inch of material. The thick layer of cut green manure blocked light from reaching the soil surface. Seeds sitting there stayed dormant. New weed seeds blowing in landed on top of the mulch. But the loose, dry material was hostile to germination. No soil contact, no consistent moisture. They dried out and died before they could establish. The few weeds that did germinate grew in the mulch layer, not the soil. Their roots were shallow and loose. They pulled out effortlessly, complete with roots. No breaking off at soil level and regrowing. Gardens using this method needed minimal weeding, maybe once a week, a quick pass pulling the occasional weed. Compared to conventional gardens requiring hours of weeding weekly, the labor savings were enormous. This should have made the method standard practice. Should have been promoted as the solution to gardening's most tedious chore. Instead, it was buried. Because the herbicide industry was exploding, chemical companies were developing products to kill weeds, building markets for repeated applications, creating dependency on poison as the solution to what should have been a non-problem. Green manure mulch solved weeds naturally, for free, permanently, without chemicals. This couldn't be allowed to become common knowledge. Agricultural extension services began promoting clean cultivation, bare soil, all plant material removed, frequent tilling to destroy weeds. This method created maximum weed problems, exposing new seeds to light with each tillage pass. Then they sold herbicides as the solution to the problem they created. The cycle was perfect for industry profits, terrible for gardeners and environment. Research comparing weed pressure in mulched versus bare soil systems was clear. Mulched gardens had 90% fewer weeds, required 10% of the labor, produced superior crops because plants weren't competing with weeds for resources. But this research was excluded from mainstream publications. Gardening guides promoted bare soil as proper and mulching as messy. The method that actually worked was framed as improper, while the method that created problems was called correct. The lie was so successful that generations grew up believing bare soil was normal, that constant weeding was inevitable, that herbicides were necessary, never learning that a simple layer of dead plants could eliminate the entire problem. Number 6, the moisture that stayed when rain stopped. The green manure mulch layer transformed water management. Gardens using this method needed 1/10 the irrigation of conventional gardens, sometimes none at all. Bare soil loses moisture through evaporation. Sun and wind pull water from the surface continuously. The top inch dries quickly, then the next inch. Water moves up through capillary action and evaporates. Without protection, soil moisture depletes rapidly. Mulch blocks this process. The layer of dead plant material insulates the soil surface. Sun cannot directly heat it. Wind cannot pull moisture from it. Evaporation drops dramatically. Rain that falls soaks through the mulch slowly, doesn't run off, doesn't compact the soil, infiltrates evenly. The mulch acts like a sponge, absorbing water and releasing it gradually into the soil below. During dry periods, the mulch maintains soil moisture for weeks. The top layer of mulch might dry completely, but just beneath stays moist. The insulation effect extends deep into the soil profile. Plant roots stay in consistently moist soil. No wet-dry cycling that stresses plants. No drought stress even during rainless weeks. The mulch creates stable moisture conditions that allow continuous growth. Gardeners using this method reported watering occasionally instead of daily. In some climates with decent rainfall, they never watered at all after establishment. The mulch captured and held every drop of rain that fell. This water efficiency was revolutionary, should have made the method essential in dry climates, should have been promoted as the solution to irrigation dependency. Instead, the irrigation industry was growing. Sprinklers, drip systems, timers, billions in equipment sales, millions in annual water bills, an entire sector profiting from gardens needing constant watering. Green manure mulch eliminated most irrigation need, threatened that entire industry. So it was suppressed while irrigation dependency was promoted as normal and necessary. Agricultural publications emphasized watering schedules, how often to irrigate, how much water to apply, never mentioning that mulch could eliminate most of this need. Equipment companies funded research on irrigation efficiency, never funded research on mulch water conservation. The knowledge that threatened their market was kept invisible. Water utilities loved bare soil gardens. High water use meant high revenue. Promoting mulch methods that reduced water consumption would hurt their profits, so they didn't. The conspiracy wasn't organized meetings deciding to suppress truth. It was systemic incentive. Every corporation in the chain profited from gardens needing water. None benefited from gardens that didn't, so the truth stayed buried. Number 7. The temperature that protected plants from extremes. The mulch layer created a microclimate that protected plants from temperature extremes. Gardens using this method produced through weather that killed conventional gardens. In summer heat, bare soil gets scorching hot. Surface temperatures can reach 140, 150 degrees Fahrenheit in direct sun. This heat kills soil organisms in the top inch, damages shallow roots, creates hostile conditions where nothing thrives. Mulch keeps soil cool. The dead plant material absorbs heat instead of the soil. Surface temperatures under mulch might be 70, 80 degrees, while bare soil nearby is 140. The difference is massive. Cool soil means active organisms. Bacteria and fungi thrive. Earthworms stay near the surface. The biological activity that creates fertility continues through summer instead of shutting down. Plant roots grow strong. They can access the top inch of soil where nutrients are most concentrated. Don't have to dive deep to escape heat. This creates more efficient nutrient uptake and faster growth. In winter cold, mulch insulates. Protects soil from freezing as deeply as it would bare. The dead plant material traps air, nature's best insulator. Soil temperature under mulch stays 5 to 10 degrees warmer than bare soil. This extended the growing season on both ends. Plants could grow earlier in spring because soil warmed faster under mulch, could produce later in fall because soil stayed warmer longer. In some climates, the temperature buffering allowed year-round production. Cool season crops thrived under mulch through summer. Warm season crops continued producing through light frosts. This climate modification was documented repeatedly. Research stations measured soil temperature under various mulch types. All showed significant buffering compared to bare soil. The effect was real and quantifiable. But this knowledge was suppressed along with everything else about the method because it threatened seasonal plant sales at garden centers, threatened fertilizer sales for season extension, threatened the industry narrative that climate limitations were fixed. If gardeners knew that mulch extended seasons naturally, they wouldn't buy season extension products, wouldn't purchase cold frames and row covers, wouldn't believe they needed climate control equipment. The truth was too profitable to bury, so it was erased and replaced with solutions that required purchasing products. Number 8, the disease that couldn't establish. Gardens using green manure mulch had remarkably little plant disease. Fungal infections that plagued conventional gardens barely appeared. Bacterial blights didn't establish. The plants stayed healthy naturally. The mechanism was biological. The mulch layer was alive with beneficial organisms. Bacteria and fungi that outcompeted pathogens for resources. That produced antibiotics naturally, that physically blocked disease organisms from reaching plant tissues. When rain fell, it didn't splash bare soil onto leaves. The mulch absorbed impact. Water infiltrated cleanly without carrying soil-borne pathogens upward onto plants. The main disease transmission route was blocked. The diverse plant material in green manure hosted diverse microorganisms. This diversity created competitive pressure. Specialized pathogens couldn't dominate. They were overwhelmed by the sheer variety of other organisms. Healthy soil fed through decomposing mulch produced strong plants, plants with thick cell walls, robust immune responses, natural resistance to infection. They didn't need chemical protection because they were biologically resilient. This disease suppression should have revolutionized agriculture, should have been studied intensively, should have become standard practice to reduce chemical fungicide and bactericide use. Instead, the research was minimal. A few studies documented reduced disease pressure, but funding for expanding this work never materialized. The industry had no interest in proving that mulch eliminated the need for their disease control products. Agricultural education taught that disease was inevitable, that chemical controls were necessary, that proper management required regular preventive spraying. Green manure mulch proved this false. Disease wasn't inevitable. Natural systems prevented it. Chemical controls were unnecessary if biological systems were intact. But this truth threatened billions in pesticide sales. So it was buried while disease management products became standard recommendations for every garden. This wasn't experimental gardening. This was survival agriculture tested under conditions where failure meant starvation. No fertilizer factories running, no garden centers open, no agricultural supply chain, just plants, soil, and knowledge that meant the difference between eating and dying. And here's what the entire agricultural industry doesn't want you to understand. This method isn't primitive, it's superior. Plants feeding soil works better than chemicals depleting it. Natural processes create more fertility than purchased inputs. Biology builds abundance while chemistry creates dependency. Our grandparents knew this. Their parents knew this. For thousands of years before chemical agriculture, farmers knew this. Modern industry made us forget because forgetting made them rich. Every natural method eliminated is a product sold. Every self-sufficient technique buried is a market captured. They profit from amnesia. For 80 years, they've been winning. Gardens have become product dependent instead of self-sustaining. Growing food has become expensive instead of free. Knowledge has been replaced with marketing. But plants remember. Legumes still fix nitrogen. Roots still mine minerals. Mulch still feeds soil. The natural processes continue regardless of industry lies. The next time you face poor yields or depleted soil, two paths exist. Continue buying products that create dependency. Or learn what your grandparents knew about soil that feeds itself. If this knowledge matters to you, subscribe now. Share this with everyone who gardens, who spends money on fertilizers, who wants abundance instead of expense. Because the method your grandparents used is still the technique that works. I'll see you in the next video.